All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4. Could you please turn your cameras on if you're here? And if you haven't already, please don't forget about the attendance sheet to sign in. Okay. Okay, so I'll start. All right. So, so finally this week we're going to talk about an actual research method. So we've been talking about the foundation of research, the paradigm of research, major issues with research data and literature review, but we didn't actually talk about any specific methods. So starting from this week, we're going to devote a week or two for each type of methods we're covering in this semester, plus ethics. So today I'm going to hopefully cover what's content analysis, the use of content analysis, why it's important, and different approaches for content analysis. But before that, let me run a quick review. So first of all, I have to rerun what the method is. So if you remember, we talked about different paradigms. Paradigms deal with how you conceptualize reality and how you should approach the truth, or how do you know certain claims are truthful. And so we said, like, yeah, there's like an empirical paradigm, a critical paradigm, an interpretive paradigm. But then once you establish that, what you think of reality, then there's the actual way of collecting data about whatever topic you're investigating. That way of collecting data is what we would call a method. So a method is a way or an approach of how to collect data and analyze them. Right? And so within the category of methods, we have qualitative methods and quantitative methods. And probably you've heard these terms before, qualitative, quantitative. And qualitative methods focus on things that are like verbal and visual in nature. So the data can be observed, but it's not quantified. So it's more like so it's similar to, so you observe a certain phenomena, you observe things ranging from like a body of text, visual materials, artistic objects, artifacts, movies, pieces of music, you name it, right? And your impressions from them is what's being analyzed, what constitute the data. So the data are these non-numerical contents you're analyzing. That's what's called like qualitative data. And so the qualitative approach would deal with those sort of data, right? Okay. So it's more linked to usually more linked to the analytical paradigm and less and exploratory research, right? And the reason for that is it's like you're just observing like your surrounding and then reporting what you've seen or heard or sensed. Whereas quantitative data only, from like the name, right? Only focus on numerical or quantified data points. So it could look into things like body temperature. That's quantifiable. like a level of blood pressure, that's quantifiable, right? The amount of money, um, academic performance, if we're talking about like testing and whatnot, and assignments and whatnot. So these are quantifiable variables. And the type of research that collect those type of data is what we would call quantitative research, right? So it's more linked to the empirical paradigms because it sets or assign numerical values into very specifically defined variables that we could measure and test. And that's the key part, that you could test and those numbers against like a reality. Like you have a hypothesis and you test the numbers. So that's the quantitative approach of data. So you're as opposed to the qualitative. So if you take body temperature versus how you feel, yeah. So I just feel irritated, like oh, or like I'm just feeling it's hot or stuffy, something like that. Just the feeling, and that feeling is just qualitative data. But once we start measuring a number, so we're talking like Fahrenheit or like the air quality or temperature or pressure, then yeah, we're talking numerical data, so it's quantitative, right? And so the methods associated with qualitative research are so things like interviews, open-ended surveys, like we mentioned, we had this slide before, focus group, ethnographic observation, rhetorical analysis, and content analysis. So content analysis here falls within the category qualitative research, right? So yeah, it's qualitative research, start from observation, you involve yourself in this data setting, you plan, share your conclusion, and then you analyze your observation, right? Methods associated with quantitative research are like surveys. So when you get a survey and you have questions to like answer on a scale from like 1 to 5, that's quantitative, right? Experimental research, network analysis, physiological research, and also content analysis. So here you see content analysis appears in both because we have different types of content analysis. It's both can be qualitative or quantitative. So to be qualitative or quantitative, right? And so yeah, well, that's why it's content analysis is how we're starting our lectures about method. And so then what is content analysis? How many of you have heard actually the term before, content analysis? Okay, so hope like at least maybe you have like a rough idea of what it means. So content analysis, put simply, is when you try to turn or to convert uh, visual and or verbal materials into analyzable data. Or it's the process of taking a large body of text, categorize it into a set number of categories, and then analyzing these categories and the relationships among them. Right? So that's content analysis. When I say like visual or textual materials, so it means anything. So when we see again, data doesn't mean numbers per se. Like data means anything you use, any giving, right? Any observable facts you use for your research. And so if we're talking about like a large book or like a group of like a painting, right? I want to analyze the painting from a specific era and how they correspond to something. Right? Then instead of I won't cannot measure every single painting, and so okay, I will say I'm going to categorize those paintings, right? So you're looking into, yeah, you will then have 4 or 5 types of paintings, right? Like it should be based on the school of painting or like the era, right? So Renaissance era, Baroque, pre-industrial, post-industrial, you name it. Be based on the school of arts, people familiar with arts, like if it, like a Renaissance, Impressionist, Post-Impressionist, Cubist, surrealist, things like that, right? So you categorize the types of paintings. Why? Why people categorize paintings? Like if do we have any art major in here, by the way? This was unplanned, by the way. Do we have art major in here? Anybody? But okay, no, okay. But why do people categorize paintings? This is an easy example to explain why content analysis is necessary. Because it's just easier than to talk about paintings. Okay, so here's like 5, 7, 8 categories, and here's like the major components or like trends within each category. So if like a painting from that tradition would look like this. So this is how they use color, they use shades, um, how they do with like how they deal with shapes. Is it going to look real or like a cube or like it's so weird? Things like that, right? So whenever you see a painting, I say, aha, this would probably belong to that thing, right? So you didn't get lost. It's not like you analyze like, oh, each painting is different. So similarly in content analysis, that's why we use that categorization, because we convert many units of text that are enormous sometimes into fewer content categories based on some rules. So I'm analyzing, yeah, if we tell you to analyze articles in the New York Times. Well, how am I going to analyze articles in the New York Times? But no, you're saying, you know what? Let's look into the type of stories that the New York Times feature and let's see how they relate to whatever topic of the day, right? So what frame the New York Times uses when it talks about like environmental crises, or when it's talk about police violence, or when it talks about the elections, or when it talks about investors, right? You would analyze, okay, he's like maybe according to the tone they're using, maybe according to the uh, associations they assign with words to certain things, right? So instead of like looking into linking every single sentence or every single word in the New York Times to something. No, I'm putting big categories, and then okay, I have a sense of what the New York Times talks about or how they talk about a topic, right? So yeah, many units of text into fewer categories. And it's also a research technique, can be defined as a research technique applied to non-numerical materials, so text, visuals, etc., that allow the researcher to analyze the materials in a systematic manner. And by systematic manner is means that yeah, you're not randomly or like arbitrarily, sorry, you're not arbitrarily selecting units and making generalizations out of those units, but you're actually having a systemic or systematic categorization which allow you to say, here I can show you the percentages within each category, or like how the categories relate to one another. Right? So that's a longer definition of content analysis, let's say. Um, so to remind you, it can be either qualitative or quantitative, and it's about taking inference from text. And text here, text in a larger sense. So text could mean actual like text, like a written text. Text could mean pictures. Text could mean videos. Text could mean anything. So anything that is readable in research could be called a text. All right, could be something mediated. So TV shows, things in the news, things the radio, podcast can be called text. Think on your cell phone, on the app, so like snaps, tweets, stories on Instagram. Those are all can be analyzed as text, right? So something we could measure, we could categorize, we could look into, right? And it could be either like a secondary source, so we could collect public data, so like things that are published in newspapers, on media channels, on on social media, or it could be primarily collected, like personally collected. So I can't analyze my conversation with you, or like our phone call, or like your interview with me, things like that, right? So it could be applied to a wide array of things. So let me give a few examples so you would at least grasp what we mean by like what content analysis refers to, or what by analyzing things in a systematic manner. Um, so one research question that content analysis can answer is like, how are men and women athletes being presented differently on like sport channels, right? So yeah, it's you could start, you could have this question by simply looking just at the percentages, right? So do we have a difference between like the percentage of times a woman athlete is presented, say on ESPN, versus male athletes, right? So is it like 30% to 70%? That's simple, right? Or could be about the way they talk about or like they feature. So it could be, for instance, like when they feature women athletes, could be different that they focus more like on the appearance, they talk about their bodies more, etc., or they talk about like yeah, their physical features more than their performance. That could be a research question, right? And the way you answer that research question is to run content analysis. So you can then categorize, okay, so you see here, here's the words by which they talk about appearance. And then I would categorize all of the time a female athlete was mentioned on ESPN and see if it fits into that category or a different category. And once you run that, we have manageable categories. So you can run generalizations about the overall content from these categories, right? And not just from non-systematic reading of just your impression of ESPN or something, right? So that's what we mean. Yeah, we took a large amount of things and then we have a fewer categories. Another example would be, does nightly news represent African Americans more as perpetrators, like perpetrators of crime, rather than victims of crime? So this is actually a very famous research that has been done, like been like since the 80s, and it looks into okay, how many, what percentage of like what percentage, like if you take nightly news, like in local channels, what percentage like they show like African Americans or any other minority as perpetrators of crime versus victims of crime, and then how does that correspond to the actual numbers? So the proportionality of that representation on TV versus the actual records. So that specific research, and we're going to show some actual tables from that research, how the representation is disproportionate, right? So that type of question can only be answered via content analysis. What's the relationship between the product category and the use of sex appeal in advertising? That's, for example, some people are interested in that, right? So for instance, what product or like a commercial category is sex appeal the most? So you can think of, do you know what a product category means? Or like a brand category? Do you know what that means? Okay, so problem. So by that I mean like apparel, like auto, like communication, like or communication technology, like cell phone ads. So if you're here talking about commercials, right? So if it's like an apparel or like a fashion commercial, an auto commercial, and a bank commercial, an insurance commercial, etc. Right? So what type of commercial or like product category that they use sex appeal the most in their commercials, right? So either we're talking about print ads or TV commercial or social media content, you name it, right? Um, that to answer that question, well, you have actually to tell us what categories are you looking at, right? So yeah, you can have like fashion, finance, food and beverages, insurance services, etc., etc. Right. So when do we see sex appeal appear the most? That's another example. Right. Manageable number of categories, and then you see how they relate to another variable, which is in this case is sex appeal, right? And so what type of speaking style correlate with successful political speeches? That's also another one. So let's say you took one candidate, like look into one candidate's speeches, let's say being aired, let's say the president, and the speech is being aired on TV, and then you wanna see the style of speech correlated with the TV ratings. So if more people turned in or stayed on the channel, you would say, okay, this is more like a successful speech. Then how you categorize speaking styles, right? There are different ways you could do it, right? So it could be about like a high pitch, low pitch, the voice. Could be about like politician who speaks very slowly, or people who speak very fast and loud, right? So is it about like the pitch, or like about like the tempo, or is it about like the content? So is it like politician who use longer sentences, shorter sentences, etc. So you have to define what you mean by speaking style. You have again an organized set of categories. You then categorize the content, and then you see how those categories relate to another variable, whether it's about like popularity, acceptance, effectiveness, etc., etc. So does any of this make sense, or sound good so far?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And the thing about content analysis is that it can be used on different things. So it could be used to analyze like traditional media messages, right? So and it could be traditional. It could be also non-traditional media messages. So tweets, Facebook posts, snaps could be analyzed on text, video, audio, combination of all. And it could be also applied to casual conversations. Like so, even my lecture technically can be content analyzed. Like conversation or messages on dating apps that could be content analyzed if you can access it. Anything could be content analyzed really if you could read it. That's the rule. When I made about quantitative content analysis, we have actually two approaches to content analysis. So qualitative content analysis is it's centered around identifying core meanings and core ideas or core themes within a larger body or larger volume of qualitative materials. Like when I say qualitative materials, I mean things that are not quantified, like speech, like drawings, things like that. So you just want to explore, in other words, uh, what themes that person or that source use. Um, it's common when you're doing rhetorical analysis or like analyzing speech or style. So for that sense, so like how does ESPN talk about female athletes in basketball or in college basketball? So let's be very, very specific, right? Um, that could be like a qualitative content analysis. You're seeing like you identify four major themes that they're talking about. So they're talking about maybe their performance. That's one. They're talking about their potential in pro sports. That's two, right? They're talking about the like balancing or like or the challenge or balancing their lives as females in sport. Like that's three. So I'm just making some examples, right? But systematically, if you theoretically can run that type of analysis, it would be qualitative. You want to see, okay, this phenomena, how it is being talked about. regardless of the quantity, right? You just want to identify the themes in whatever text you are analyzing, right? So you're not looking into measurements. You're not interested like into volumes, right? Or like to comparing, okay, in that type of commercials, those themes appear the most. So remember my example about sex appeal on commercials. So yeah, you're not interested into what volume, like, or how many times sex appeal is being used in commercials. But maybe you're just interested in, sorry, uh, what five major themes you see in auto commercials, right? So what things you use? So is it like more about celebrities? Is it more like about uh, like using animated characters, or even you could look into the story or narrative? So do they use a shock value, or they use like something about safety or warmth? Whatever the point is with content analysis, like you define your variables. Whatever you want to look into, it can be possible. So that's qualitative, right? As opposed to quantitative content analysis, so that's content analysis that is interested into the quality or the proportionality or the volume of units within each category. So you see the difference. If my question is no, I actually want to see what's the most recurring themes in commercials by Chevrolet, right? Because that's my question, then I have to show numbers. I'll have five established categories, and I'm exactly specifically interested into the percentages. What percentage of commercial fall into which category? Because my research question is like I want to do a quantitative comparison between the categories. Does that make sense, man? So in that sense, yeah, it is quantitative. Then you have to assign numbers into the units of analysis you're using. So yeah, this type of analysis, as we're going to see later, we won't talk about like the coding procedure today that much, but later we're actually going to dig deeper into the coding procedure. But this type of quantitative content analysis, you have something we call a code book, which is like basically a guide of how to run the content analysis. So it describes the categories and it defines them to you, and it tells you how to assign each units into these categories that are already established. So related to the qualitative and quantitative approach, we have also the inductive and deductive approach. So the inductive approach is linked to qualitative content analysis, and deductive approach linked to the quantitative content analysis. And we're going to talk more about details about these two, more details about these two. But in general, I'm just going to explain the steps for you real quick. The inductive approach. So if you remember, we talked about the difference between inductive and deductive. If you remember, inductive, we said you start from observations, then you recreate or create the theory, right? So you start from the small pieces into the larger, into the larger idea. So the totality, the sum of these sub samples will lead to the overall theory. Whereas in the deductive approach in general, you start from a general idea, a general theory, and then you apply it into smaller cases. So usually we said before, as we said before, research in general starts with inductive, but it must then proceed with deductive. Once you have a theory and it's supported, then your role is to test how the theory can be applied into different contexts, so it could be improved. So in the inductive content analysis, you start with picking a topic. So obviously, yes, what you're researching. So yeah, like violence in video games, talking about safety, or like catastrophic framing, when we talk about news, whatever you want to pick. You choose a theoretical framework, which is different than a theory. So theoretical framework just means colloquial, what we call something in the ballpark. So I am interested in like female representation, like that's the topic. Like that's the framework that they're going to use. Or I'm interested in the marketing approach, right? And then you look into this. Or I'm interested in parasocial interaction, or I'm interested in nostalgia marketing, things like that, right? Like what theoretical framework going to guide your research. Then you read a sample of data of like of the data sets. So you're looking into Twitter posts, Instagram pictures, articles of the newspapers, uh, shows in a TV channel, you name it, whatever you want to pick. You generate common themes from reading those, right? So you read, then you generate common themes, and then you go back to the original body of text and you recategorize the data or the data points according to the emerging themes. So you see how it works, right? Um, so you read first, you come up with themes, and then you categorize the data according to the themes that just emerged. You define then how those themes or categories you came up with are different, and then you present your results. So yeah, here's like the thematic categories, the definitions, and example of them from that body of text. Right? It would become clear later. Then we could have a deductive approach. So obviously, it's decided your topic, but then you actually pick a theory, a very specific theory. So there are multiple theories about it. So it could be theory, like we have like a parasocial interaction theory. We have like many theories in marketing that you could use. We have theories on like body image. So those theories already present a framework of how you should think about the data set. Based on that, you develop a code book. So a code book simply means a guide by which how you categorize the data. So the categorization of the data could be called coding, could be called categorization, could just be called some content analysis. It all means the same thing. That is, you assign the units of the data or the data points into one of the categories, whether you have them developed before or after, as we see. You analyze the data then according to the code book or the coding guide. You run statistical analysis. So remember when you say like you want to look at the frequency of appearance, that like one example of a statistical analysis, right? You want to see a frequency or like a correlation between like one variable, which is probably featuring female athletes, and then talking about their future career. So how much does that correlate as opposed to talking about the future careers of male college athletes or college athletes or um, and then once you run the analysis, demonstrate these statistical relationship you uncovered from your data set. So this could sound very confusing first sight. But let me ask you a question, like a simple question. Uh, how many of you are in Instagram? Okay. Can one of you tell me an account that you follow? Anyone? Any account?
Cardi B?
Okay. On account. Okay. How many follow Cardi B? You don't think like watch it. Okay, Cardi B. You know what who Cardi B is, right? Okay. So Jennifer, then I'm going to ask you another question. What type of content does Cardi B post?
She posts like some brand content and mostly like popular culture content.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by popular culture content?
Like she'll post a lot of stuff that's like up and coming, like the new like styles, and like a lot of people will tend to follow her because she's an influencer. So like this weekend for Valentine's, she posted like these really cute pictures of like a romantic getaway with her and Offset. And so to me, that's kind of like, everyone's gonna want to do stuff like that now.
Mm-hmm.
Even me.
Yeah, yeah. So here's like a perfect example. So you mentioned like branded content. So if our research project is about Cardi B Instagram account, we can simply say, okay, we're going to look into like her, call it like popular culture or like, yeah, or like trends post that are branded versus non-branded, right? So we having one variable here with two categories, right? So branded versus non-branded. And then we're going to see which one generates higher engagement. All right. So by engagement, I mean likes, comments, etc., tags, saves, you name it. So that's one way. But what other things does Cardi B do on social media? Right. So did she talk about things other than products or popular culture or styles? What other things did she talk about?
Sometimes she'll talk about politics, or she'll talk about like just her own drama and music.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we have other categories as well. So of course, yeah, she would talk about her music, right? So you have the music, you have politics. Sometimes you just talk about, yeah, the drama in the house, like about her kid. I don't know, about breaking up, about like fighting with another person. Yeah. So you want to see, let's say you're a researcher, you're interested. What type of content generates the most like intensive discussion, let's say in the comment section on Instagram, either in the timeline or Instagram Live, you name it, right? Like whatever. So yeah, to do that, then you do two things. You can either take an inductive approach. Okay, you would say, I'll just consume tons of like content from Cardi B, and then I'm gonna say, okay, here are like 5 or 6 categories that could account for all of the content by Cardi B. Does that make sense? So I could make the product or brand endorsements, house drama, politics, yeah, like jokes, and then funny content, and then maybe self promotion, like for musics or albums or concerts when we used to have concerts, etc. Right? So those 5 categories, right? I generated after I exposed myself to Cardi B content, right? So that's an inductive approach. So I read the content first, I came up with the topics, all right? Or it could be there's already a theory that explains celebrity presence in social media. So someone is saying, okay, here are like 3 types of promotions on social media that celebrities are using. So it could be like either like a partnership for like a sponsored promotions. It could be self promotions, or it could be like a lifestyle promotion. So it's not linked to a specific brand. It's linked to a specific style. So those are like pre-established coding categories, i.e., a code book, and I explicitly define each one. So I then anyone could use that guide to apply it to analyze any celebrity account on Instagram, right? So you see the difference here. One, you just read something and then you came up with categories based on your impression of what was going on, or someone actually has done a research on it before, like not the exact same thing again, but like something similar or somewhat similar, and then you applied it to whatever case you're dealing with. So you see how the two, yeah. So that's exactly the difference between inductive and deductive. We'll have time to talk about both, and you're going to actually practice some of both. So I'm excited about this one. Okay, we still have some time. So yeah, issues with content analysis. So in order to ensure that content analysis is like done correctly and it's reliable and valid, there are five issues that can be addressed via the steps of content analysis. Um, and they are about the sampling of the messages, the unitizing of the messages, the coding scheme or protocol, intercoder reliability, and validity. Um, so today, we won't have time to talk about all of these five things, but we're going to talk about how to sample and unitizing the message. Um, let me first, yeah, let me since we connected. So first of all, the steps of content analysis. So first of all, you wanna pick what are you going to look for or code for. So here are some examples. Uh, are you going to code according to the topic, right? So going back to the Cardi B example, so the topic could be like music or fashion or politics, right? Or personal stuff. These are topics, okay? Or are you standardizing according for the tone? So you know what a tone means, or like it's not. So like a positive tone or a negative tone, like a formal tone or informal tone, or like a sarcastic tone versus like a serious tone or an angry tone or like a calm tone, right? So it's about not about the topic Cardi B is talking about, but the way she's talking about it, right? Yeah, so when Cardi B is being funny, it's this she gets the same level of engagement than when she's just being like self-serving or just talking about, hey, buy my new album, right? So it's about the way she's presenting, right? So that's another, so the tone. And platform Cardi B, you can look into the accounts of politicians. So like with politician, like if you look into, let's say, Twitter account, like some post would be like, like someone in their staff acted down, right? It's not like a real, like a casual style, or when they actually type something like very casual. So this is like about the tone, regardless of the topic. So regardless if they're talking about health, environment, economy, blah blah blah, you're just looking at the tone. You as a researcher pick that, like you focusing on the topic or the tone, depending on what are you interested in. You can look into the presence of key messages as well. So, for example, you're just looking into like if there are common slogans being used. So you could look in, for example, into the presence or absence of a hashtag, or like if like the presence of like a certain words that signify something, or like in pictures, like how many times does like I don't know. So how many times does like an animal appears, like specific animals? One actually that's a project I ran myself. Um, so we looked into the. You familiar with the Humane Society? Right. So we want to see the engagement with the Humane Society's post. So we looked into posts where they featured when they featured like puppies versus when they featured kittens versus when they featured like none. And we wanted to see which one of these three would like generates the most engagement, right? So we were like looking for presence of absence. So like if it's like a puppies, one if it's present, zero if not. Kittens, one if it's present, zero if not. And we see then how does that respond to the level of engagement that post on Facebook gets. So we did that for like a presence of something, and we also did it for topic. So was the topic, are they talking about call for donations or like about events or like adoption of like specific pets? So yeah, so we did it for topic, we did it for like this. We didn't do it for tone because it was hard, but tone is always hard. Um, then yeah, do you know why tone would be harder? Any guesses? I think it's obvious, but why is like coding for tone would be harder?
Probably because it's not like explicit, like it's what you kind of feel the words are telling you. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Kylie. So yeah, because tone is like based on your own interpretation, like more subjectivity would come into the fold. Not something like, yeah, oh, I see a kitten, I see a puppy. So yeah, but like the tone, oh, they're being sarcastic in here. Well, maybe not, or like, or like they're being aggressive. I don't know. I don't see it as aggressive. So once you deal with things like tone, you get into more like a muddy water or like something more like a gray area, for lack of a better word. And it could look for like features. So so again, if you're analyzing tweets or like Instagram posts, so they did have like an interactive feature. So if you know, like if you've noticed on Instagram stories, you have like polls now or a question, the celebrity or like influencer can ask you a question. So they did that story included that feature or not? So you could look for specific features, or like if it had like an emoji or not, or like if celebrities were present. If we're talking about like a brand, let's say a brand. Or even like a charity organization. So when they feature a celebrity, let's say in their YouTube video, uh, do they feature a celebrity or not? Do they feature like different places? So it could be like a very specific feature, like or like the color. Uh, so yeah, you could measure, for instance, um, this was okay. I had another interesting research project. So we analyzed pictures of warm colors versus pictures of cool colors. Do you know the difference? Do you know warm colors versus cool colors? Do you know that? What that means? Any graphic design majors in the house? No. Um, so warm colors are like the red family, so red, orange, yellow. Cool colors are the blue family, so blue and green, greenish. And so, and you know the filters, right? On Instagram and Snapchat. So filters either fill within like one of these two. So did they do they suppress the cool colors or the blue thing, or they and embolden the red colors, or vice versa? Do you notice that difference, right? Like picture would look either more yellowish or more bluish, greenish, right? And so we wanted to see how would that respond to excitement by the viewer. And it was like for a tourist destination, right? So if you use filters that with warm colors versus filters with like cool colors, which one creates more excitement in potential visitors, right? So we did that because we had content analysis, right? Like we and that's with technology. we relied on our eyes originally, but with technology, we could even, there are tools to assess, like with Photoshop and other apps, what colors are present in a picture, right? So yeah, what are you coding for? That was the my major point. Okay, this yeah. And then sampling. So sampling simply means, sampling issue simply refers to, are you going to use the whole thing or like a subset of the whole thing? So yeah, I ask you to code, to look into what Cardi B Instagram about. Are you going to look into every single post by Cardi B since she started her account? Okay. So that could be like tiresome. Or you could pick like a time frame. So you say, okay, we're looking into 1 year only, so the last 12 months, and maybe we're going to draw a sample of that. So if she posted 5,000 posts, I don't think she posted 5,000 posts, like 1,000 posts maybe, including stories and whatnot. We're going to look into like 400 only, so it becomes simple. So something like that, right? So, or like if you're, yeah, I'm analyzing the New York Times. So the New York Times has been like, yeah, publishing since the 19th century. It's impossible you're quoting everything from the New York Times. But you're saying, okay, I'm going to look into the last 6 months, and I'm also looking into like a random sample out of that, right? So I have a manageable number of content that I could deal with, right? And so, yeah, that's what sampling mean. When you cover everything, we call that a census. So a census covers all of the content in your population content. And a sample, yeah, it's just a selected subset of that population. All right. Good. So yeah, I think we can stop here. Do you have any questions? All right. So if that's the case, yeah, I think I'll see you next time. And by the way, regarding assignment one, so probably you will, for those who submitted, so probably you'll see your grades by tomorrow. So tomorrow grading will be done. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.